Opening the center immediately, this pawn thrust aims for rapid development and a fight for central squares. Opening the center symmetrically, preparing for rapid development and potential king-pawn skirmishes. Focusing the knight's power on black's central pawn prepares immediate development and potential kingside pressure. Developing a knight here shores up the e5 pawn and prepares for a vigorous central engagement. Unlocking a central pawn tension while eyeing potential weaknesses around black's knight opens up complex middle game possibilities. Challenging the bishop's placement directly, this knight boldly questions white's initial intentions and seeks active counterplay. Unlocking the kingside safety, preparing a central pawn push and unleashing the rook's potential. Boldly challenging the Ruy-Lopez center, black gambits a pawn for active piece play and potentially disrupting white's king safety. Seizing the initiative, white opens lines and demands black's immediate attention, challenging central control and creating dynamic possibilities. Safeguarding the king's repose, black solidifies their central presence before the storm truly gathers. Bringing the queen into the game now offers defensive support for the e4 pawn and prepares for potential central advances. Retreating the knight defensively redirects pressure from the center, aiming to consolidate without conceding ground. Exposing black's doubled pawns now gains a persistent structural advantage. Opening that b-file offers dynamic possibilities, but it exposes the queenside pawns. Reclaiming the pawn opens a diagonal for your bishop and aims to disrupt black's central structure. Repositioning the knight to b7 aims to support the central pawn majority and potentially create a safe haven for the knight, though it concedes some queenside space. Developing the knight to c3 now reinforces the e-pawn and prepares for central pawn advances, gaining crucial central space. Securing the monarch's safety is paramount, freeing up pieces for a more active role in the center. Recapturing on e1 reclaims the pawn and prepares to challenge the center with the rook, opening lines for potential kingside pressure. Re-establishing the rook's presence on the central file offers a defensive shield for the king and prepares for potential counterplay. Unlocking diagonals and threatening piece activity, this queen repositioning disrupts black's central pawn structure. Suddenly, the knight activates, eyeing the queen and controlling vital central squares. Unleashing an attack on black's central pawn structure, this move forces a decision and aims to disrupt coordination. A bold counterattack, immediately contesting white's active bishop and aiming to disrupt the queenside coordination. Exchanging the bishop simplifies the position, removing black's active diagonal and opening the f-file for potential king attacks. The bishop sacrifice dramatically reshapes the pawn structure, creating long-term weaknesses for white's queenside. Capturing the queen opens a critical d-file and forces black into a challenging defensive posture with limited active pieces. Reclaiming the piece, black aims to activate the rook on a central file, seeking counterplay amidst this imbalanced material situation. Reinforcing the central pawn and eyeing the open d-file is a sensible step, preparing to contest territorial advantages. Fighting for space and opening lines desperately, this pawn push might weaken your kingside pawn structure. Seizing the open file with this pawn thrust is a decisive step toward dominating the center and restricting black's pieces. A king hunt is initiated, aiming to exploit the open files and disorganized queenside. Retrieving the rook to the central file re-establishes pressure and prepares for potential pawn advances, a wise recuperation. Opening the g-file provides a crucial pathway for your rook, but it significantly compromises your king's safety. This knight finds a commanding central outpost, ready to dominate the d-file and exert pressure. Shifting the king actively pursues a safer haven while preparing to contest the central open file. Solidifying the queenside pawn structure addresses the isolated doubled pawns and prepares to activate the rooks on open files. Re-engaging the bishop on the flank aims to exploit the open queenside and disrupt white's centralized control. Pushing the f-pawn aims to contest the central d4 square and open lines, potentially liberating white's pieces. The rook's maneuver to e8 prepares to contest the crucial open file, aiming for greater activity and potential counterplay. Trading rooks simplifies the position, creating a more open board for the remaining pieces. King's centralization now becomes paramount, aiming to activate the monarch into the fight, while white's pieces regain their coordination after the exchange. Centering the king creates a defensive fortress and prepares to contest the central files. Recentralizing the king offers a secure haven, preparing for potential pawn advances and defensive maneuvers. Attempting to create a fortress with pawns, but potentially neglecting king's safety. Seeking to disrupt white's pawn chain, black repositions the knight, aiming to create dynamic play and pressure the d4 pawn. Swapping knights simplifies the position, creating a passed pawn on the queenside for white. Relocating the king to a safer central square liberates the remaining pieces for active engagement. Centralizing the knight offers a robust defensive structure and prepares to contest the open files. Consolidating pawns centralizes the king, preparing for a potential pawn storm on the kingside. Pushing the g-pawn aims to pry open the kingside for your remaining pieces. Sacrificing material to open lines for your rook and potentially activate your king is a bold choice, though it does leave your king exposed. Clearing the board opens new tactical possibilities and a race towards promotion for white's kingside pawns. The black king ventures into the open, abandoning its defensive pawn shield and inviting tactical skirmishes. Sacrificing a knight to dislodge the opposing king opens up new attacking avenues. Sacrificing material for king's safety seemed wise, but this advance invites a decisive pawn race and risks exposing your monarch too much. This knight leap creates a powerful central outpost, threatening to dominate the board and restrict black's king's mobility. Bringing the bishop back to c8 aims to reorganize defenses, though it still leaves the king exposed to pawn advances. Pawns become critical now as the knight shifts to a more aggressive outpost. Reactivating the light-squared bishop, this move aims to create active play and potentially exploit white's exposed king. Consolidating queenside pawns before engaging in pawn pushes opens up avenues for the rook. A crucial pawn on b3 now becomes a target, creating immediate tactical possibilities for black. Gaining space on the queenside by preparing a b4 advance is key now. Targeting the queenside pawns is a sensible idea, but doesn't immediately address the vulnerable king. Anchoring the pawn chain, this move prepares to restrict the black bishop's mobility and secure queenside space. Injecting life into the queenside pawn structure, this advance aims to seize control of the central squares and create dynamic counterplay. Challenging the bishop's position, this rook pawn advance aims to restrict black's pieces and open a path for white's knight. Challenging white's advanced pawn chain by attacking its base is a bold, albeit potentially risky, counter-initiative. Securing the kingside pawn majority creates a vital passed pawn for the endgame. Attempting to gain space on the queenside with this pawn push, though it neglects the looming threat to the king. Opening this file unlocks immediate pressure on black's isolated queenside pawn. King exposure now becomes paramount as the black monarch boldly steps into the center, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure. Steering the knight towards the central squares offers better mobility and a potential for future passed pawn support. Consolidating the king's position is paramount, preparing to contest the vital central squares. Shifting the king to g3 seems premature. A more patient approach would fortify the queenside pawns first. The bishop retreats, preserving its position on the queenside while the white king continues its assertive march forward. A bold knight repositioning, aiming to disrupt black's central control and perhaps hunt down that advanced bishop. Pivoting the bishop to g6 aims to contest control of the vital dark squares, a crucial area for king's safety and pawn advancement. Repositioning the knight to a more active square, preparing to infiltrate black's weakened queenside and create new threats. Shifting the king toward the queenside now, looking to connect the rooks and potentially offer some defensive support. Capturing that pawn on a7 seems like a greedy grab, potentially isolating your knight and giving black counterplay. The knight now aims to harass the kingside pawns, potentially creating passed targets. Controlling the critical c6 square now forces black's king to choose between remaining passive or exposing itself further to gain central space.